Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we're going to share how to hot foil with regular dies. Now, I typically will use hot foiling plates or Betterpress plates for my foiling, but I'm going to use these two die sets here. I've got scribbly snowflakes as well as the Arctic snowflake background. I'm going to use this fun holographic I don't even know what it's called, foil. It'll be in the description under the supplies. And it's one of those foils that I find is a little bit too busy for most things, but for what I'm going to do here, it will work. I also have this warm wishes sentiment that I'm going to be doing. And typically I don't necessarily cut off that thin little strip from the side when I'm cutting my foil, but I'm going to use this for the wishes part of that sentiment. So for my foiling with my die, I have my Arctic background die here. I put the foil down pretty side facing the die, and then I'm foiling on hammermill cardstock. I've got my Glimmer machine all heated up, and once I have that sandwich ready, I press the timer button, and once that button stops blinking and goes solid, I put that sandwich through my Platinum 6 machine, and you can see how it foiled that die cut beautifully. You get a lot more fine detail when you foil with dies. The lines are a lot finer, but it works beautifully. And I'm going to take the negative part of that foil and we're going to use the solid hot foil plate and foil that. For my loose dies here, I'm just arranging them on my Glimmer machine, and I'm going to do that same sandwich. And here I've got the blade side up. For both of these sandwiches, I have the blade side up, foil pretty side facing the dies, and then my hammermill cardstock, and then I press the timer machine on my Glimmer machine. Once that goes off, once again, I put it through my Platinum 6 machine for the pressure. You need both the heat as well as the pressure to do that foiling. You can see there I've got some over foiling, and I'm just going to use a solid brush, and I'll just brush it on there, and that'll get most of it off. For most of what I'm doing, that's not an issue. It's going to hide it. Taking your dies and your foiling plates off of your Glimmer machine, it comes with a tool. I typically just use my fingers. I wash dishes regularly and use super hot water, so I'm used to the heat. But to be safe, it's a much better idea to use the tool that comes with your Glimmer machine and use those to lift off your plates off the machine. So right now I'm doing the wishes part of my warm wishes sentiment. So I have a tiny little bit of that foil. Once again, that pretty side of the foil is facing my foil plate. I did tape it in place to make sure there's no shifting, but what I didn't do was pay attention to how much space I left for the wishes. So I ended up needing to redo it again in a better space so that I have space for it. This die cut cuts the shadow for both the warm as well as the wishes. So you want to make sure that you leave space for that. So here's the brush that I used to get some of that overfoiling off. You could use a sand eraser as well, but you have to be careful with that sand eraser because it does affect and dull the foil. So I usually try with this brush first. A foam brush often will work as well, just something that will take that excess off. It's not sticking to anything, it's just still attached to the rest of the foil, so it usually comes off fairly quickly. Once I have both of those wishes words foiled for my sentiment, I'm going to put that to the side and put my solid hot foil plate on my machine. Then once again, that pretty side of that foil is going to go against that plate, and then my hammermill cardstock, place it on, or place the two plates on top of it, and then press the timer button. And once that is done, I can put that right through my Spellbinders Patinum machine to foil that. Now with this type of foil, this background is going to be very, very busy, and I wouldn't use it for a background for a card. We're going to use it for a mat around the card, and we're also going to die cut out of it. So you're not going to see that much of it in one solid place. Because of the way this foil is, I don't like the negative foiling for reusing for backgrounds. It's just too much and far too busy, but it'll work for what I'm using it. And you can see the pattern there, but you can't see it a whole lot because of the pattern and the shine from that foil. So I'm going to take my pieces here and I'm going to cut them down for the front of my card. My card is going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. My negative foil, or the part with the lots of silver, is going to be 4 inches by 5 1/4. And the other foiling, this piece here that I'm cutting, is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. So we have 1/4 inch difference between each one of those matte pieces. And I'm doing the same for the 2 cards. I'm doing 2 different cards here with 2 different backgrounds. Basically, I couldn't decide which snowflakes I wanted to use for the background, and I thought I would do 2 cards and have some slight alterations between them. So I have this beautiful, stunning snowflake die cut that we're going to be using. And I'm using this silver piece here that I'm doing as a matte, and I'm going to die cut out of it. Because you're only going to see the outer 1/16 of an inch of this piece, why not utilize that piece of cardstock and die cut? So I'm cutting my warm part of my sentiment as well as the smaller of the 2 snowflakes from this die set. Once that front piece goes onto it, you're never going to know this was die cut from. You do want to be careful when you're putting your tape on your foil. You can see that it does affect the sticky part of the tape does leave a residue on that foil. So when you're die cut or when you're taping onto the foil, you want to be extra careful that you're not taping in a place that you're going to see. Once I have my snowflake and my die cut words out, I can cut the rest of my sentiment, the shadow part, and you can see how pretty that's going to look. I love this sentiment set that it combines both the foiling as well as the die cutting as well as the shadow. I think it's a great concept, and it gives a really unique and interesting look to those sentiments. And there's a nice variety in that set as well. So I'm doing all my die cutting for both cards. I'm just stacking everything up so that once I'm done my die cutting, I can have everything ready to go and glued together. For my large snowflake, I'm taking some white glitter cardstock. It has a little bit of a pink tone to it, so it's got a really pretty sparkle to it. I do put it back and forth through my Spellbinders Platinum machine just to make sure that all of those details get cut out. And even though this glitter cardstock is really quite thick, it die cuts beautifully. I do need to use my die pick to take some pieces out a little bit, just because this die cut is a little bit intricate. I keep most of the pieces on the inside of it because I want that solid glitter on the background. I like the look of that texture, but there are a few small die cut pieces that I will poke out, and they come out really, really easily. And you can see how that die pick is actually really helpful for just kind of popping the small die cut pieces out before taking my fingers and pulling it the rest of the way. It just gives you something to hold on a little bit better. And because the die pick is so fine, you can get even the tiniest piece out. Now that everything is die cut and ready to go, I can start layering my cards. So I'm going to use the solid hot foil piece first that has the die cut out of it, and then the other foiled piece. And you can see how we only see the outer edge of that solid foiled piece. So you're getting the prettiness of that foil, but it's not as overwhelming as that whole piece in one. It would just be too much if you had that entire piece showing, and you also don't see any of the die cuts that have been die cut out of it. This is a technique that I've done for many, many years. It's a great way to get more use out of your specialty cardstock, but until you tell someone you do this, they have no idea. Even if you were to put this piece of or this card up to the light, you probably wouldn't even be able to see it because I've got really thick cardstock for my card base, and then I've got the cardstock on the front. So there's nice thickness to it that you can, again, you don't even know. I'm going to, while my card base and those layers are drying, I'm going to glue my sentiment onto the shadow piece. And I like to use a reverse tweezers for this. That way I can hold onto the die cut easily while I'm adding the glue, and then just reverse or release the tweezers or release the handle on the tweezers from that die cut when I put the glue down. I'm using some Barely Art glue to glue everything in place. It's a nice glue. It holds really well and it starts to stick really quite quickly. And I have it in a bottle that has a really fine tip to it. So when I have a really intricate die like this, I can get little bits into all sorts of different areas and not worry about getting too much glue that's going to be seeping out. I don't put it over every single thing from this die cut, but I do put it on any area that's sticking out. Basically any place that could catch onto something when it's coming out of an envelope or being put into an envelope. Any protrusion, basically. So this glitter cardstock piece here, I'm going to glue this down first, and then I'm going to put my acrylic block on there to hold it down nice and flat, give it good contact with that base while I put the glue on my second snowflake and put that down. Once those are both down, I can start doing my holographic die cut. Once again, putting little tiny drops of glue on any of the areas that are pointing out. Now for this layer is going to be glued right onto that glitter layer, and liquid glue on glitter cardstock tends to take a little bit longer to dry. Because it's non-porous, it doesn't really absorb the glue, but because of the texture, you also want to make sure that it has really good contact. So once I've got everything placed properly, I once again put that acrylic block on there and give it some time to dry. Now this centerpiece comes from that foiled die cut, and for one card I'm not going to use it. For the second card I will use it. It's one of those pieces, you can choose whether to use it or not. You could also choose to leave it within that second die cut and have that a little bit more solid. I chose not to because I didn't want it to be so overwhelming with that silver, but I do like the look of it both with and without. For the card on the left, I'm going to kind of try keep it a little bit less dimensional. So I glued my sentiment down flat. But for the card on the right, I'm using some thin foam strips for that sentiment. It's going to be popped out a little bit more. And then I'm also going to take some Pink Fresh Arctic jewels or glacier jewels, and I'm going to add some jewels to that die cut. It's just going to add a touch more shine, a touch more bling, and a touch more dimension. And it's going to go well with that sentiment being popped out a little bit. I take the backing off of that foam tape, and then I'm going to glue it down to the center bottom of the card. And then for the gems, I have a large one for the center of the snowflake, and then I'm going to choose a few small ones for some of the pieces, branches of the snowflake. So I'm doing smaller gems. I don't want to overwhelm it with gems, but that one in that center just didn't seem to be quite enough. So I just added a few, and I did smaller ones. Ties everything in a little bit better. And these gems have a little bit of a holographic shine to it as well, or opalescent shine to it as well. And that ties in really well, and they coordinate really well with the glitter cardstock that was used in the snowflakes. Once those gems are on there, I do give it a few minutes to dry and let that glue completely set. And here is our two finished cards. I love using the dies for hot foiling. It's just a different way, an additional way to use those dies and get more use out of them, as well as it gives you more options with your hot foiling machine. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Have a fantastic day.